Tisztelt Hölgyeim és Uraim, én nagyon köszönöm, hogy eljöttek a Koreai Kulturális Központba és részt vesznek a magyar-koreai művészeti találkozónkon. A mai workshop az első, amit koreai és magyar művészek és galéria tulajdonosok számára szerveztünk, melyből hagyományt szeretnénk teremteni, hogy lehetőséget biztosítsunk a jövőbeni együttműködésre. Földrajzi értelemben nagy a távolság Koreai Köztársaság és Magyarország közt, azonban történelmünk és gondolatvilágunk hasonlósága meglepő. A ma délutáni találkozón magyar és koreai előadókkal kívánjuk bemutatni egymás számára a két ország képzőművész Krisztináját. Első blokkunkban magyar előadóinkat hallhatják, majd a koreai művészek szólalnak meg, az előadásokat követően pedig szabad, szakmai beszélgetést tervezünk. A nyelvi nehézségek elkerülése véget, angolul, illetve tolmácsok segítségével zajlik a workshop. Most pedig kérem, hallgassák meg Horányi Attila művészettörténész előadását.
It was quite a challenge to put this slideshow together and put something meaningful about Hungarian, contemporary Hungarian art together in such a short time. So that I was given and in so few slides. So what I decided to do, speak a little bit about what I think the larger context of contemporary Hungarian art is, and then show a number of artists and most important works. And I'm not going to talk about them very at length because I have like 25 or so. But I hope you can get this PPT. You can take this slideshow back home and look at it, and then perhaps check out those artists that you find important. I also brought these two books. Some of you may not know this. This is two books that selected some of the best, as you would say, some of the best acts in the last 2 or 3 years, the last 15 years basically, who are in contemporary art. And I think these two books represent very well both the art and the critical thinking about that art. So perhaps we can send after you some of these books. Please take a look at them. So this is not going to be obviously a history of modern or contemporary art in Hungary, because that's practically possible. And I'm going to try to be as objective as possible, but probably it's going to be somewhat subjective, my selection of artists. It can't be any other way. And it's going to be organized around the medium and the attitude that's behind it, that's behind these artists. Just a glimpse of our historical context here. After the Second World War, there was a fairly strong modernist art in Hungary that was basically suppressed by 1949 by the Soviet oppression. And from then on, it was socialist realism that prevailed, basically. But in the 60s, especially in the second part of the 60s, a new generation of progressive, or you can call them avant-garde artists, appeared on the scene, and they actually looked up on these artists who were active in the 40s, and who were active actually in the closet. So that's the Budapest School and New Avant-Garde. And in the 60s and through the 80s, more and more art was, allowed to be shown in public galleries and in museums. Well, it wasn't a free country, obviously, but that art that wasn't directly political, and especially against the current regime, was more and more allowed to be seen. In 1989, as you all know, the Berlin Wall fell down, and communism in this country, in this region of the world, of the Soviet regime ceased, and that led to a new wave of art, where art is defined by that triangle that you can put up through autonomy, market, and politics. These are basically those three, let's say, categories, three factors that are the most important around here. Most obviously around anywhere else where we're a free country and a market economy. is, if I had to characterize contemporary Hungarian art, I'd be, you know, it's almost impossible, but I tried to give a few ideas, and I would say that it's almost always conceptual. So you would find, at least in the best, when I'm talking about contemporary art, I try to talk about the best contemporary art. So the best is almost never, you know, painting just for fun. It's almost always conceptual, highly reflective on the context, reflective on the medium itself, and most of the time, in some ways, politically reflective as well. Politically, not necessarily in terms of party politics or liberalism or conservatism or whatever, but rather knowing what changes these images, these artworks would entail within the community. You know, politics comes from polis, town, from the Greek polis, town. That is, politics and political art is something that has to do with our common understanding, with our common things. And much like your art that I just checked out and looked around, Hungarian contemporary art uses an incredibly diverse media. I mean, you can find watercolors, and you can find oil painting, and you can find sculpture and installation, whatever. So it's very diverse, and actually you can find artists who are working in more than one medium. So somebody can paint and then create installations or mobile sculptures, for instance. And so this survey, I have basically five very short sort of parts. The first is Present Perfect, which tries to look at art by artists who were active since the 60s and 70s, and I'm going to look at painting, and then technical images, and then sculpture, object, installation, and finally on something I called conceptual and political, and it's not defined by medium at all. So the Present Perfect, oops, you can hardly see, unfortunately you can hardly see the artist and the title here, but later on when you, well, this is, can I point with this one? This is the artist, and that's the title, so you can hardly see. But when you bring it back home and you look at it again, you will be able to check these artists out. Erdély Miklós was probably one of the single most important artists back since the 60s, and this is a fairly huge piece of artwork which you can find in the Ludwig Museum, which is called War Secret. Many ideas flow from him. And then the other one, again, a fairly revolutionary artist since the early 70s, late 60s, early 70s, Tamás Szentgyőr, was just having a show again in the Ludwig Museum. Well, this is an early piece by him, Untitled. It's called Moveable Remorse, because there was a small mirror in it, and using a little magnet you can move this little mirror in it, and you can find yourself in it, and also that head was very strange. Again, something very important, Dóra Maurer, an extremely important artist, mainly a painter, but also worked with films, classical films, and with photography, and she is always working in serials. And the reason she's so important, much like Tamás Szentgyőr, they both teach at the Fine Art Academy, and so a number of younger artists up to now are basically, well, in some ways following them. Oops, I did something wrong, I'm sorry. Yeah, okay. And then finally, almost finally, it's György Jomanovic, who's a sculptor and also was active basically at the Academy of Fine Arts. And Ákos Birkás, who probably never taught painting, but is one of the most, the most concentrated and thinking artists. He's around 70 and changed his style of painting in the last 15 years. Before was doing something totally different, and now he's painting extremely activist and political pictures, actually quite huge ones. And finally, Imre Bukta's exhibition in Vicsarnok just closed. He is somewhat younger than the rest of the bunch. I mean, I was showing in this present perfect phase. And he is actually living in the countryside and working as an agricultural worker, if you will, as a farmer, but at the same time is creating art. And in his art, he is working together with material element, with things that come from that lifestyle, living in the country. Painting. Well, Paul Gerber had a huge and highly successful exhibition a couple of years ago, again in the Ludwig Museum. Attila Szűcs is one of the best-known Hungarian middle-aged painters who's figurative painter, just like Paul Gerber. Somewhat like a, as if painting from memory. It's all kind of like ghostly and dusty, but at the same time has something, something going on where you don't really know what exactly is happening. It's called investigating figure. And also Szilárd Cseke, Dark Vision for the Future, is one of a more figurative painter of contemporary young or middle-aged artists. This is a work not from not very far long ago. And again, I'm going to show you two abstract artists, András Bernard, object number, I guess 463 it's called. And so this is an abstract, non-figurative work that kind of draws you inside. And then there's another one by Gábor Erdélyi, who was at Venice Biennale, well, I'm not sure when, like 15 years ago, who is a monochrome artist. He's coming from one of the most important monochrome school. Basically, it was a school, a class at the Academy of Fine Art in the beginning of the 90s. And he is one of the most important painters from that period. And this is a great-looking painting, but on the side you can see how color, how the paint is kind of like mixed together, and what puts this whole together. Technical images. This is Technika Schweiz. Actually, this is a photography, but they are also working in installation and other type of medium. It's called Commuting Gunmen, and it's a series. It's with other gunmen, and these people. I mean, these robes, these dresses were, in use like 100 years ago, 150 years ago. So it's all about tradition in some ways, but it looks very, out of place, especially with this kind of portrait-like thing. And then another one, Gábor Gerhes, Far From Home, who's using, this contemporary photography thing when you are staging photography and putting the whole thing together, and you're also appropriating all sorts of popular images. This is one of my favorites, actually, so I included him here. Again, Dezső Szabó. It's called Bath, from the series of Spot, where he is creating these images, creating small maquettes, small models, basically, and then shooting them and then enlarging them, larger pictures. And Ágnes Epegesi, well, I guess one of the first women. She is the first woman, I think, in the series. Self-portrait pieces. This is kind of like a photogram. She's been working with this type of technical image making from like 20 years ago, since 20 years. And this is a series that she's looking at the role of the housewife, basically, and then she's kind of relating to it in some ways. I see my time is almost up. Marcel Eszterházy Orthodromy is a very good one. This is a lenticular image. On the one hand, you can see the grandfather of the artist is a very young man. On the other one, on the left hand, on the right hand, the image of the grandfather of the artist as someone who was sent away from, the aristocrats, and he was sent away in the countryside to work on the fields. And in the middle, you see the two images together, and this becomes some sort of a monster. This monster, who was actually a decent grandfather, was also something like a spy for the political party. And so this is a very strange and very, very deeply felt story. Hungary Német, she's residing in Berlin, and this is a crystal clear propaganda to transparent methods. This is kind of deconstructing political propaganda and political propaganda images. That's what she's doing on this. She has extremely interesting videos, and she had a fantastic exhibition in Venice like 4 years ago, I believe. Sculpture object. Adam Kokes, a very strange object. Very, you don't really know what that thing is up there, but it has a presence of sorts. István Csákány, actually you can check this out, this piece. It was in Kassel at the Documenta. It was actually created for that huge show last summer, but presently it can be seen at Ludwig Museum. I'm showing you a bit of it just to show you. I mean, it's a huge kind of like a huge room full of equipment to sew things, and it's all carved out of wooden. So it's a huge, extremely huge wooden sculpture / installation. Its sheer monumentality is something that draws you in, although you can't enter the place itself, but it kind of draws you in, you can see it. And then Tamás Kaszás, Conference of the Plants. It was shown at an Aviva Prize. It was invited there, and there you can see all the different plants from the műcsarnok, various offices of műcsarnok of Kunsthalle Budapest. These plants came together and formed some sort of a conference of sorts. And Nemese Bencúr, well, actually it's in Park Gallery. It was in Park Gallery. Ani was just talking about this. It's called "Don't Keep Aloof." It says here, keep aloof from from everything material, everything that's is about buying and shopping and things. And on top it says, don't keep aloof, so that be open to, be open to transcendence, to whatever. I believe this was one of the best shows actually Ani had over there. Gyula Várnai is again a very well-known installation artist and also picture maker sometimes, but an installation artist. This was again in műcsarnok. It's a huge installation using logs and transforming these logs to some kind of an image, into an image of almost a computer-like image. And almost finally, Attila Csörgő, Platonic Love. It was created quite a number of years ago. This is beautiful. You can see these three kind of platonic objects getting into one. Here's the thing, and here are the motors and everything else. It's an extremely fine thing. It was one of the hits actually in the 90s. One of the most important works, I believe. And then Antal Lochner, whose exhibition just a couple of months ago closed in Ludwig again. This is called Wallmaster, where Antal is creating passive working devices. You can see people are actually in the exhibition space. They are actually working out, but at the same time working with artworks. So it's kind of like a pretty complex thing, and a meditation about what art is and what work is, and what it is to do work, physical work or other types of works. And finally, Conceptual Political. I thought I should include one image by Miklós Mécs. he is pretty much a an outsider artist of some sort, almost always political and pretty much against both market, both reigning political situation. So this is one piece where he is creating a sword out of a cross. I'm not going into details. This was again a very successful exhibition in Ludwig. Actually, first it was shown at Jeux de Paume in Paris. Société Réaliste is half French, half Hungarian duo, and they're working with all sorts of signs. And this is actually a series of signs that reads, the middle reads this: the future is the extension of the past by other means, and it is written up there using the Limas New Roman character set, which is a type set, basically a character set, where every single unit has a serious meaning about a division, either in a town, in an urban context, or in a larger national context. So these are all walls, basically, kind of stonewalling two parts of a town or of a country. And I guess this is my final one. This was the body of Nefertiti on the by the Little Warsaw, again a duo, two artists working together. They were at the Venice Biennale in 2003. And you see, the head of the Nefertiti is in Berlin, and they created basically its body. And the magic happened. The director of the museum let the head be put on the body. Well, in Berlin, of course, not in Venice. And so two cultures and many thousand years kind of reflected on each other. I mean, the artist in some ways imagined how Nefertiti would look like, what she looked like basically, but it was also about cultural appropriation, what that head is doing in Berlin and why is it not in its original place. And so it created an extremely huge uproar, and that's it. So it was a survey, an extremely fast survey. I'm sorry for the speed and for the amount of things that I had to put in, but I hope you could glimpse a few things, and then perhaps later on, especially if you can take a look at this slideshow alone, and some of it will make sense, really. Well, thank you.